She moved in to live at the top of a tree to prevent it from being cut down, but her madness didn't have an effect, and the young activist with an angelic face had to stay there for over 2 years until a strong shake completely shook her. After finding out that a logging company was going to cut down hundreds of hectares of ancient sequoias, Julia Butterfly decided to climb the tallest one to protest against the devastating decision. But the executives ignored her, so she stayed up there determined to find a solution.
The first 3 months up here were the most difficult for me. I was broken physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. I had to be broken on every level. And the reason I had to be was because when I prayed and I said, okay, if this is what I'm meant to do, then please, Creator, use me. Allow me to be a vessel. In order for me to be a vessel, to be used, I had to have my attachments broken. Because attachments make us solid. You can't be a vessel, a true vessel, if you're attached. You have to be emptied out first. You have to be shaped and formed. When I climbed into the tree, I was still very attached to comfortability. I was attached to fear. I was attached to anger and frustration and sadness. I reached a point where it was learn and transform.
Julia's home in the tree was a platform of 2 meters by 1.5, and after living on Luna for a year, she was able to set up a second platform where she protected herself with a plastic tarp, a sleeping bag, and they hoisted up food to her with a rope.
The hardest part of all, if I had to pick one point, would be when they were cutting all the trees down. I start to cry every single time I talk about it because it was like, it's like sitting there watching your family. And you listen for hours. And then they stop the chainsaws and they pound this wedge in. And clink, clink, clink. And you can feel it. It's like, ow, ow, ow. And then they give the final clink. And the tree goes, and it screams. And you have to sit there and listen to it scream as it's... Every single time a tree went down, part of myself was ripped out. And it was the hardest thing I think I've ever gone through in my life.
However, when it came time to face the bad weather, Julia was completely alone. She had to endure storms with winds of up to 150 km/h, freezing rain, hail, and finally snow that destroyed her shelter, leaving her completely exposed to the elements.
2 days after the men pulled out from having me under siege, the worst storm came. It lasted 18 hours. And it was howling. It sounded like wild banshees, the tarps. Like that, but times like 1,000. Just... The wind was so hard that the platform was tilted at an angle like this. It was just a constant 60, 70 mile an hour wind that had the platform tilted. And then the 90 mile an hour gust would come and wham! And just fling me. Just whoop! I went flying. And I was trying so hard to stay alive, but it was clenched. My teeth were clenched, my eyeballs were clenched, my muscles are clenched. It's like maybe if I just clenched hard enough, I would hold on to my life. And meanwhile, it's just, wah! And hail's flying at me and bouncing off of me, and I'm getting hit with sleet, and I'm sopping wet and getting thrown all over the place. And the hardest gust is when I literally flew like 3 feet over a branch of Luna, and I grabbed onto it. I don't want.
However, despite all the dangers Julia exposed herself to, the brave young woman continued on and turned her experience into valuable lessons for her life.
I want to be strong for you, Luna. I want to be strong for the forest, but I can't even be strong for me. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And then I heard this voice. Think of the trees in a storm. Okay, I'm thinking. You start to come to me, and I start thinking the trees in the storm. The trees that try too hard to stand up strong and straight are the ones that break. The only ones that make it through are the ones that bend and flow and let it go. Julia, now is the time you too have got to let it go. You can't be strong, you can't stay attached, not even to your own life. You got to bend, you got to flow. That's the way to make it through this storm, and that's the way to make it through the storms of life. So I did, I let go. I started hooping and hollering and screaming and laughing and crying, and if there'd been a hidden camera, we would have gone, she's nuts. And I was, but that's how I made it through. And the reason I made it through is because I let go of my life. It was like, okay, if I
Finally, after 738 days living in the sequoia, Julia managed to reach an agreement with the logging company, and with her protest, managed to raise over $50,000, with which they paid the company to rescue the tree and an adjacent area of about 12,000 square meters.
Because I've let go of my fears now, that come along with being afraid to get hurt, they don't have any control over me anymore. No one has control over me anymore. You want to hurt me? You want to stoop to your lower self? Bring it on. Because you're not taking my love, you're not taking my exuberance, you're not taking my zest for life. And when I go, I'm gonna go, and I'm gonna howl and rage to the very end, you know? And that storm taught me that lesson.
I understand that all of us are governed by different values, and I understand that to some people I'm just a dirty tree-hugging hippie, but I can't imagine being able to take a chainsaw to something like this.